The kitchen was a whirlwind of activity. Toys lay scattered across the floor, a testament to the boundless energy of 5 young children. Dishes piled high in the sink, a silent reminder of the never-ending cycle of chores that came with motherhood.
Morning, Andrea. How did you sleep?
Not well. The kids were up again.
I know it's tough, but we can manage.
I can't do this anymore, Rusty.
What do you mean?
I feel like I'm drowning. The voices, they won't stop.
We talked about this. You need to keep taking your medication.
I don't want to be a zombie.
But you need help. I'm here for you. We're in this together.
I don't want to hurt the kids.
You won't. You're their mother, and they need you. We'll get through this.
Rusty clung to the hope that their love could withstand the storm brewing in their lives. But as the days turned into weeks, the storm only seemed to gather strength, casting a shadow over their lives. Later that day, the living room was transformed. Gone was the chaos of the morning, replaced by the infectious laughter of children at play. Andrea watched from the sidelines, her heart torn between a mother's love and the crushing weight of her own despair.
I can't protect them forever.
What's going on in that beautiful mind of yours?
I don't know how to be a good mom.
You're doing great. Just take it one day at a time. We're a team, remember?
But what if I can't?
We'll get through this together.
He pulled her close, holding her tight, willing his strength to flow into her. But as he held her, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were perched precariously on a precipice. Nightfall brought a semblance of peace to the Yates household. The children, their energy spent, were finally asleep in their beds. Andrea stood before the bathroom mirror, her reflection staring back at her, a ghost of the woman she once was. She picked up a bottle of pills from the counter, her hand trembling as she examined the label.
You're not strong enough.
With a surge of despair, she tossed the bottle into the sink. She made her way to the living room, drawn by an invisible force to the heart of her family's world. Rusty arrived home to find Andrea curled up on the floor, her back against the sofa.
Andrea?
They're so innocent.
You're their protector. You need to fight for them, for yourself. We'll find a way.
What if I can't?
You're not alone. We can get through this. We have to.
But as he held her, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were losing ground. Andrea's struggles with mental illness were not a recent development. Even before the birth of her first child, there had been whispers of a darkness that lingered beneath the surface. She was a young woman when she met Rusty, a bright and promising nursing student with dreams of a large, loving family. Rusty was instantly smitten by her quiet beauty and gentle nature. As their relationship blossomed, Andrea confided in him about her family's history of mental illness. Her father had battled bouts of depression throughout his life. Her mother had suffered a nervous breakdown after the birth of Andrea's youngest brother. Despite these lurking shadows, Rusty was determined to build a life with Andrea. They married young, their love a beacon of hope. Andrea excelled in her studies, her passion for nursing fueled by a deep empathy for those who suffered. Rusty pursued a career in engineering. They were a team, their strengths complementing each other. As they built their life together, the subject of children arose. Andrea yearned to be a mother. Rusty shared her desire. But beneath the surface of their shared dream, a seed of doubt had been planted. Andrea couldn't shake the fear that she was destined to repeat her mother's struggles. The weight of motherhood would prove too heavy a burden to bear.
The arrival of our first child, a healthy baby boy we named Noah, filled our lives with a joy we had never known. I embraced motherhood with a fierce tenderness.
I was overjoyed at becoming a father. For a brief shining moment, the darkness that had haunted her past seemed to recede.
But as the weeks turned into months, a subtle shift occurred. The sleepless nights, the constant demands of a newborn began to take their toll on me.
Andrea confided in me that she felt overwhelmed, inadequate. I reassured her that what she was experiencing was normal.
He encouraged me to rest, to let him share the burden of caring for Noah. But the darkness was slowly seeping back into my life.
The voices that had haunted her childhood returned with a vengeance. Andrea tried to fight back, clinging to the love she felt for our son.
I sought solace in my faith, but the darkness was relentless, its grip tightening around my mind. The birth of our second son, John, 2 years after Noah, seemed to exacerbate my struggles. The joy of welcoming another child into our family was overshadowed by a growing sense of dread.
The voices grew louder, more insistent, urging her to harm herself, to harm our children. Terrified by the thoughts that invaded her mind, Andrea sought professional help.
I confided in my doctor, my voice trembling as I described the intrusive thoughts. A diagnosis of postpartum depression was quickly made, and I was prescribed antidepressants.
The medication offered a temporary reprieve, but it was a band-aid solution, masking the symptoms without addressing the underlying illness.
My pleas for help became more desperate. I begged Rusty to believe me, to see the terror in my eyes.
Torn between my love for Andrea and a growing sense of helplessness, I vacillated between reassurance and frustration.
He threw himself into caring for our sons, but the storm was relentless, its winds howling through the chambers of my mind.
With each passing day, she slipped further away, and the tragedy that unfolded was not a sudden, inexplicable act of violence. It was the culmination of years of suffering, a desperate cry for help that went unanswered.
The sun rose on June 20, 2001, casting its golden rays across a seemingly peaceful suburban neighborhood. Inside our modest home, however, a palpable tension hung in the air.
Andrea moved through the motions of her morning routine with a mechanical precision. The voices, once insidious whispers, now roared in her ears.
Rusty, oblivious to the depths of my despair, kissed me goodbye as he headed off to work. He had no way of knowing that this would be our last goodbye.
As the front door closed behind me, Andrea stood frozen in place.
I glanced at the clock on the wall, its ticking a constant reminder of the precious little time I had left. The voices grew louder, their demands more urgent.
Andrea's hand trembled as she reached for the bathroom door.
I knew what I had to do. The voices had made that abundantly clear. End their suffering. Save them from the darkness that awaits.
Andrea's hand trembled as she reached for the bathroom door, her heart pounding in her chest.
The bathroom, once a sanctuary where I sought solace and rejuvenation, had transformed into a chamber of horrors. The air hung heavy with the scent of bleach and despair, the pristine white tiles now a chilling backdrop for the unspeakable acts that were about to unfold. One by one, I drew the bathwater from my children, my movements deliberate, my expression vacant as if my body were being controlled by an unseen force. The water, crystal clear at first, slowly turned cloudy as my mind raced, my thoughts a jumbled mess of fear, despair, and a perverse sense of duty.
Mommy, what's wrong?
It's okay, baby. Mommy's just feeling a little under the weather.
She coaxed him into the tub, her touch gentle, her eyes betraying the turmoil that raged within. Noah, trusting and obedient, complied without protest. He loved his mother, and her word was law. As her son splashed playfully in the water, a wave of nausea washed over Andrea. The reality of what she was about to do crashing down on her with the force of a tidal wave. But the voices, relentless and unforgiving, drowned out the last vestiges of her conscience, urging her forward, sealing her fate and that of her innocent children. The next few hours were a blur, a horrific montage of unspeakable acts that would forever be seared into the annals of criminal history. One by one, Andrea led her children to the bathroom, their tiny voices echoing through the house, oblivious to the fate that awaited them. Andrea, her mind teetering on the brink of madness, her heart pounding in her chest, forced her son into the tub, her movements growing more frantic, more desperate as the voices in her head reached a fever pitch. The water, once a symbol of life and cleansing, became an instrument of death, a watery grave for Andrea's sanity and the innocence of her children. And then, silence. The house that had once echoed with the laughter of children was now eerily quiet, the only sound the steady drip of water from the bathtub faucet, a constant reminder of the horrific acts that had transpired within its walls. Andrea stood in the bathroom, her body trembling, her clothes soaked, her mind a blank slate. The voices that had tormented her for so long were gone, replaced by an eerie silence that was more terrifying than any sound. She looked down at her hands, her once gentle hands now stained with the blood of her own flesh and blood, and a primal scream escaped her lips, a scream of anguish, of despair, of a soul teetering on the precipice of madness. The abyss stared back, its depths reflecting the shattered fragments of a life torn asunder. The shocking news of the Yates children's deaths spread like wildfire through the quiet suburban community. How could a mother commit such an unspeakable act? Andrea sat in a holding cell, her gaze blank, her body rocking back and forth. The trial of Andrea Yates began a year later, the courtroom packed with reporters and grieving family members. The prosecution, led by Joseph Omby, presented a methodical case. The defense, led by Dick DeGuerin, argued that Andrea was not a cold-blooded killer, but a severely mentally ill woman.
They presented expert witnesses who testified to the depths of Andrea's psychosis and postpartum depression.
The trial became a media sensation, sparking debates about mental illness and the criminal justice system. Public opinion was sharply divided. The prosecution portrayed her mental illness as a convenient excuse to shirk responsibility. As the trial drew to a close, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. The jury deliberated for 3 days, their faces etched with the weight of their responsibility.
On March 12, 2002, the jury delivered its verdict. Guilty. Andrea Yates was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison. The courtroom erupted in gasps and sobs.
Andrea Yates, her face pale and drawn, was led away in handcuffs, her fate sealed. The guilty verdict in the Andrea Yates case sent shockwaves through the nation. Many believed it reflected a failure to understand severe mental illness.
Andrea's legal team, led by Dick DeGuerin, refused to accept the verdict. They set the wheels in motion for an appeal.
Their argument hinged on flawed testimony from a key witness. The prosecution had presented false testimony about a TV show. This revelation provided Andrea's team with the ammunition for a strong appeal. The appellate court agreed to review the case. For Andrea, the news of the appeal offered a glimmer of hope. The wheels of justice, often grindingly slow, can sometimes be nudged into motion by a collective outcry for what is right. Such was the case with Andrea Yates.
In 2005, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals overturned Andrea's conviction, ruling that the prosecution's use of false testimony had prejudiced the jury.
The court ordered a new trial, granting Andrea a second chance at justice. The courtroom was silent as the jury, their faces etched with the weight of their decision, filed back into the room. The air crackled with anticipation.
Andrea Yates, her face pale and drawn, sat ramrod straight at the defense table.
The judge addressed the jury foreman. "Have you reached a verdict?"
"We have, Your Honor," the foreman replied.
The clerk read the verdict. "Not guilty by reason of insanity."
A collective gasp swept through the courtroom.
Andrea, trembling, buried her face in her hands, tears streaming down.
The verdict was a testament to the power of perseverance and the recognition that mental illness is not a crime. The Andrea Yates case was a media frenzy. The horrific nature of the crime captivated the nation. Newspapers splashed Andrea's face across their front pages. Stories painted her as a cold, calculating killer. Cable news channels provided round-the-clock coverage. Talking heads dissected every detail, speculating on motives. The public couldn't get enough. Andrea Yates became a household name. The media often resorted to sensationalism, coverage fueled by speculation and conjecture. Andrea was portrayed as a monster. Her mental illness was used against her. The public struggled to reconcile her image. The court of public opinion had reached its verdict. The trial became a media spectacle. Cameras were not allowed inside, but the media set up camp outside. Every twist and turn was dissected and analyzed. The line between news and entertainment blurred. The media's coverage of the Andrea Yates case was not limited to simply reporting the facts. It became a platform for a broader societal debate about mental illness, motherhood, and the criminal justice system. The case ignited passionate discussions about the adequacy of mental health care in America. The prosecution argued that Andrea's actions were a result of her own selfishness. The defense fought tirelessly to humanize Andrea, presenting her as a victim of a debilitating illness. The media, reflecting the deep divisions within society, gave voice to both sides of this debate. The public struggled to make sense of the tragedy, their opinions shaped by personal beliefs and experiences. The Andrea Yates case continues to haunt the nation, grappling with mental illness, motherhood, and the criminal justice system. The questions remain, their answers elusive, their implications far-reaching. How could a mother commit such an unspeakable act? Was she a cold-blooded killer or a victim of mental illness? The jury decided she was not guilty by reason of insanity. The verdict did little to quell the debate outside the courtroom. Some believed she deliberately chose to end her children's lives. Others saw her as a victim of a broken system. The unanswered questions lingered, echoing through the nation. The Andrea Yates case left an indelible mark on the national conversation about mental illness and the criminal justice system. It forced a nation to confront postpartum psychosis, a severe mental illness that can afflict women after childbirth. The case highlighted the inadequacies of the mental health care system, particularly for women suffering from postpartum disorders. The public outcry led to a renewed focus on mental health legislation and advocacy. It sparked a national dialogue about the role of the media in shaping public opinion. The often sensationalized coverage highlighted the need for more responsible reporting on mental health. The legacy of Andrea Yates is one of hope and progress, igniting a movement for change.